it's great that our kids will find this normal when they grow up, but just to be able to talk about aspects of humanity now before we move on too far into it.
Hi. I really enjoyed the presentation. Thank you. My name is Track. I'm head of marketing from Mataya. I do not have a doctorate. I've never written a book, and I can't play a musical instrument. So it's funny that John said that, because I actually find myself having a lot of trouble understanding why I'm sitting here at the moment, because I feel in the wake of this, I haven't really contributed much to the technology, to the history. All I can really say is that about 3 years ago, I don't know if any of you know my colleague Brendan, who also is now based out of New York, who also works for Mataya. We were actually roommates in college, and one day he came up to me, and I think I was doing something, I was being pensive and smoking cigarettes or something. He walks up to me and he says, "Track, augmented reality." I said, "I don't really want to talk about last night, no. It's this new technology, you have to check it out." And he was showing me these flash animations that he was working on where you were tracking an ID marker, and he was doing all these crazy visualizations. And I thought, this is amazing. And I was fortunate enough to then join Mataya a year or so later. And since then, my primary focus is sort of, as Joe said, but without lavishing so much flattery upon myself, going around and informing people kind of the value of the technology, and not just in order to sell software, but also just to make people understand that augmented reality is far more than just a bunny rabbit popping out of the cover of a newspaper. It's a way of being able to access all that information and connecting the digital and the real worlds. I still to this day am, to some degree in the back of my mind, I'm a crossword puzzle enthusiast, so every time I'm in a Starbucks, every time I'm in a Starbucks and there's a copy of New York Times, I grab a puzzle, but I find myself thinking, as I'm scanning the articles, I cannot believe that we have these 2D interfaces that are in no way connected to information. And it's not, by Dana being sort of spoiled or living in a tech bubble. It's the fact that if I go to the New York Times website and I'm reading an article, I'm like a mouse click away from finding more information, video content, images, all sorts of stuff. But yet we still have this kind of like almost obsolete, unconnected material where you can't do that. And before sort of augmented reality, the only thing you could really do is then look up the website on your mobile phone and find the article and do everything else. But it baffles me that we still sort of live in this age when we can't connect that wealth of large amounts of information to these things that we interact with on a regular basis. And that's one of the reasons I really like Mataya, because and just the technology, because it's kind of the vision that at some point in the very near future we will be able to access information from almost anything. It sort of goes back to my history kind of in writing and communications, and the concept that everything has a story, not necessarily a narrative, but everything has a reason for existing, right? And to be able to actually access that information is not a novelty. It's a value, and I'm very much looking forward to that day when it transpires.
Track, I just was going to say, Track is being very humble up here, because after interviewing Track and talking to him many different times, he'll say to me, "Joe, I work for just this amazing company. I have access to all of these most amazing R&D people, and as you listen to Track talk about Mataya and talk about augmented reality, you know every intricacy of AR." So he's very humbling in some of what he's saying up there. I mean, his insight is really amazing. So I just want to mention that. But all right, Ken, you're up next.
I like that when I do the Saturday crossword puzzle on paper, I can't cheat. It's really good. Oh, okay.
You do it, Ken?
Yeah, nice. How many people do the New York Times crossword puzzle? Yeah, there you go. We all got to meet up and have a drink out.
And do crossword puzzles.
We do crossword, that's right, because we're very cool. So, all right, there's a reason that I showed past technologies and past content that came from them. Two examples I gave were books and movies. Because if you think of printing technology, many things could have happened once we had printing, but we got the novel. And many things could have happened from Edison's invention, but then all of these content inventions, which were not technical inventions, they were inventions of, this is what works for people, montage, mise-en-scène, various kinds of camera tricks and focal tricks that you see every day, whether or not you know it. There are reasons that you're being emotionally attached to one character versus another on either a movie or Sopranos. And what's interesting about this is that what it all says and why it's important for AR is that, so what's not going to change, maybe for hundreds of years, if ever, is this. Our brains aren't going to change. We have no idea what the hell's going on in there. I mean, people work really hard, and maybe except for Ray Kurzweil, no one else has any clue. I mean, there are people who spend their entire lives, and it's a big mystery how we do what we do, which means with all the technology changing around us, and in some of them it goes through their exponential phase and gets really exciting when they level off. The brain is the same as the brain of the Cro-Magnon 30,000 years ago. We're not any different, which means we're basically building all this stuff around an incredibly amazing fixed point. And that means that every time you throw another enabling technology in the ring, be it printing on books, or be it being able to put sequential images together 24 times a second, or be it, oh, I can make any object appear, you're not going to get just anything. For the web, you got Facebook. You sort of got MySpace and it went away. You got Twitter. You didn't get other things. And because collectively, all those brains converged on what humans do with whatever you have. So the very exciting process of discovery is culture is going to take whatever we do, and 90% of what, or more, of what people in this room try is not going to stick when we throw it against the wall. But then the things that do are going to become the phenomena like Facebook and like Twitter. And I think we all know this, but I think as we try to explore what those things are that take off because they're what people really embrace, as opposed to what's temporarily cool and everyone forgets it like 5 years later, we should remember that the target is the collective minds of people, and that has to be respected because we're not going to be changing that anytime soon, and so you have to pay a lot of attention to what's going on with, not with your bits and bytes and electronics and this, but with the minds and the hearts of people.
I wanted to kind of just add to that point, because I was going to ask this question later on, but you're bringing it up right now, Ken, is that, people look at the internet as the collective consciousness, and is that the next step when AR and augmented world truly kicks in, we have that collective consciousness that is pure and that's out there?
We're going to say more?
Don't try to answer it once.
Oh, what do you mean by pure?
I mean, what I'm saying
Describe
is
pure.
that, this kind of, I don't want to get to the data thing, but, it just came out, and I'm not going to get political whatsoever, but it just came out that President Obama is looking to turn over the internet to an international community. President Bill Clinton, former President Bill Clinton yesterday, said that he was against that and thinks the U.S. should maintain that. We talk about big data, and a question came by a gentleman earlier that Google controls these data sets, and John just brought up the fact that how this data is controlled and that sort of thing. So I guess what I'm kind of looking at is, as we look at big data and how it's moving, it truly becomes a collective consciousness, and is AR that vehicle that's going to bring us there?
I see AR as being a way to experience, as being a way to, through some of the sensors that you're using, also track and sense things that are around you. And as lots and lots of people use it, to be able to go and build up lots and lots of data, and also provide to someone who's using it the ability to see information. But I guess I don't really see it as being a replacement for the web, or, I mean, the web is data, right? Lots of data. Oops.
And the web is a sensor.
Right.
I mean,
the web is a sensor, because in part there are people typing away at their keyboards, and there are also people walking around with their smartphones, right? Whose information is being put out on the web. And there will be people walking around with things that are going to be wearables on wrists, wearables on heads, looking at stuff that now can be seen in different contexts and would otherwise but I guess I don't see that as being a game changer in terms of the basic low-level stuff. I see it maybe more in terms of when you get to go and do things. The difference between, for example, knowing that maybe before you meet somebody, you Google them. Nowadays, that's considered perfectly normal and non-spooky. On the other hand, if I meet you and I suddenly whip out my phone, like, and start looking you up, that's awkward. But on the other hand, if when I meet you, because I'm wearing something, and because you want me to find out stuff about you, I can simply look at you, I can see around you, same way that you would have a separate Facebook page or a separate web page. I can see around you all of this informational dust that basically gives me information, it gives me things I want to know, tells me it's your birthday because you're wearing a little birthday hat. And if I don't see that, then I'm probably not going to say happy birthday, and I'll be considered to be really rude because everybody sees that, right?
Right, meet someone at a bar, see their arrest record, ask them out.
There are some people for whom that would be a plus, I would think, right? And other people for whom it wouldn't, but, you know, it's the same information. It doesn't magically come out there because of AR. On the other hand, it might magically be able to get to you much sooner than it normally would, courtesy of AR. So maybe you don't get to be talked by the person at the bar because you instantly know that they have the arrest record rather than finding out too late.
It's actually hard for me to envision, and I say we, like a royal kind of we, feel like I've heard this a couple times today, but this idea, so you mentioned your presentation too, this idea that we're all going to be seeing the same content.
Not the same.
Sorry?
Oh, no, I meant that we can see the same, I didn't mean we certainly will see the same.
But even, yeah, but even then, I guess it might just be because of perspective, but maybe it's just because we all live in this kind of like, we live in boxes right now. You know, we live in boxes, this kind of app economy that constrains us to, if we want to use something, it has to be inside kind of like this, I don't know how to describe it necessarily, but that's a huge contrast to the internet, right? Because the internet is accessible from a bunch of, proprietary things, like, the browsers. You can access, for the most part, all the same content. That's really not, it's not there right now in augmented reality. And I feel like I have trouble thinking beyond that because it's just, if you have a hammer, all thing you see is nails. But I think it's actually going to be the internet that brings augmented reality to a more ubiquitous state. I would really like to see more investment in the mobile web. Like, let's take the mobile web and let's start trying to figure out how to access camera APIs so that we can actually start opening up augmented reality experiences, and then those augmented reality experiences can use.
Just so you know, all day, Blair has been programming that sitting next to me.
That's awesome.
He has been. I've been watching it today.
And that's fantastic. It honestly is.
Let's give him a hand, he's actually been programming.
But I think I would really like to see that happen, and then I think that will still allow these kind of, because like the core of augmented reality is really all this proprietary technology that lives in, at least on the non-academic side, but in all of these companies that are here, Micaiah, Dacry, Flipart, Layer, et cetera. That's really, that's the foundation of all these companies, right, is their technology. And I think the mobile web could allow us to sort of break outside of the application dynamic and get into an area where that proprietary technology can still be utilized, but through a portal that every single person that uses technology right now can access.
I think that really is, the goal is not to have lots of little providers that are completely, totally separate any more than it is in the web itself.
Yeah.
And also not to have that uniform experience that everyone gets because, it's very hard to enforce uniform experiences, right? And even right now, you use even the same search engine that I use. It's really not. With your experience using Google is not my experience using Google, for example.
Sure.
Independent of whether we're even logged in. Because you're coming in from one particular IP address, I'm coming in from another IP address. And, Google knows something about where we are and what stuff got done on that before. So it's like all over in terms of wanting to be anonymous, right? But it also means that you can have things that are customized and crafted just for you. And that's very exciting and a little scary. Because it means that what you see and what you hear, especially if you are listening to things that are very well known, very popular, very big, you can have certain amounts of censorship, basically, whether or not you call it.
Could I see something there, expand on it? Because this actually came up from some research that came out of our lab, and we were actually concerned about it. We got a best paper award I want that building to be smaller, or I want that crooked street to be straight. And of course, it was just with an iPad, but the fundamental underlying technology would certainly carry over into wearables when the wearables become widely available at affordable prices. And what we realized was that in a dystopian scenario, we're all walking around in this gleaming, beautiful sea, and everything's lovely, and there's art on the walls. I mean, well, you don't see the homeless people, you don't see that, there's dirt on the walls. And, you might think that's never going to happen. We never let that happen, that we would just always, wear our rose-colored ornamented glasses. At the same time, when was the last time you ever went to a restaurant and had a great meal and then demanded to be taken back to the kitchen so you could find out the truth? Ever? So we live in a world where when we can shield ourselves from unpleasant things, we do. This is the human condition. And so we, as the people who are enabling augmented reality, I think what you're saying, see, there's some hard questions to ask about which world are we going to live in.
Yeah, can I do that? I couldn't agree more in the sense of, and by the way, a guy named Jemai Casio, I would highly recommend you read, C-A-S-C-I-O. And I interviewed him about 3 years ago, and he talked about augmented shopping. And by the way, forgive me if I get some of the terms wrong, but I mean, you walk into a store, and you're a fan of Coke. So you walk down the soda aisle, and when you turn your head in the real world, there would be Pepsi on the wall. You would see other Coke products, because your preference is to not see that. And I think what I'm fascinated by is I think about just and I was thinking this on the way here tonight, in this college setting, is the Wi-Fi something where there's, and again, so the tech might get wrong, but is the Wi-Fi something where there would be some kind of college rules? I actually did a conference here 4 years ago. Wi-Fi encryption in colleges is different than other institutions. So would I only be allowed to see certain things? So would my vision kind of turn into a college setting? Then I walk to the subway, and if I even get reception in the subway, it's going to be MTA dictated. If I walk by a mailbox, there's RFID and some kind of sensor technology. So in one sense, it's sort of like, am I going to be walking through this sort of odd kind of constantly shifting environment, or will I have a uniform experience, which I think is probably going to be more the case, which is based on my preference. And I couldn't agree more. I wrote a short story about this, where a guy is playing a game going through Penn Station, because if you commute to Penn Station, please give us a game to not have to experience that every morning when we don't hurt other people. And in this game, I wrote for a magazine called Media, this short story. This guy is playing a game, he's grabbing coins, and at one point he sees a bag of something on the ground, and he kicks it really hard because it's supposed to be a bag of coins, and it turns out he's kicking a homeless guy. And he takes his glasses off for the first time in 2 years and rubs his eyes, and he sees that he's broken this guy's nose. And to me, this type of scenario, maybe I'm dystopian, but I think it's inevitable. And again, I'm with the experts who would know, is that even possible in 5, 10, 20 years? But I can't see, if you get a chance to read the book, I'm blanking on the title, I'm sure someone here will know it, but I got to interview him as well, about the big concern about artificial intelligence in terms of when you do Google searches, that your computer and cookies to sort of get to know you, so that eventually the preferences about who you are and how you search, like two people, the two of us can do the exact same searches and say we're both Republican or whatever and live in the same town, our searches could look completely different even though we were exactly the same. So the logic is that as if our lives in this realm, the PC realm and mobile, are sort of controlled in one sense by the preferences in the AI that sort of dictate our lives. Again, for me, I just see that being inevitable that will shift over into the new immersive environments we move into, whatever the makeup.
I just want to jump in. I want to make sure if anyone has any questions to ask the panel, please feel free. We have a microphone. We can walk over to you if there's any questions. This is a good opportunity if anybody wants to ask a question.
Could you repeat the author of the augmented shopping thing you just mentioned?
Jemai, J-A-M-A-I-S, and his last name is Cascio. I'm mispronouncing it, C-A-S-C-I-O. I think he's Canadian, and he's awesome. I will give him as much credit as I can.
You were raising it.
There were a number of people back in the days. There were a number of people back in the days of Mono 2000 and the early wired issues that were eccentric inventors, and they put together whether elaborate headsets or portable computers that would back then,
for example, of folks at the Media Lab, like Brad Sonner and Steve, and Thad is involved with Google Glass, and Steve is involved with company management advising.
And-
So there's a number of those people that have, over the years, gotten back into doing things that have to do with eyewear.
And in fact, what both Steve and Thad have done as the years have gone on is they've kept on the cutting edge of, at first they looked like, Locutus from Star Trek The Next Generation, but then it just kept getting smaller and smaller and sleeker and sleeker. And of course, now it's hit this interesting place where there is this very high-speed internet enabling technologies. And so now it's tied in real-time with the world around them. But they've always, all the people who stayed with it, have kept getting their form factors smaller and smaller and smaller as the years went on.
And actually more than that, right? I mean, last week I was walking around the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco, and this is my third or fourth year going there, and I was, I don't know how to describe it, but I was very surprised at the amount of companies that now have immersive VR headsets. You had Sony displaying the Project Morpheus thing, and it's like we're back in 1987. It was, and that's saying, like, of course,
Well,
everything is.
not,
I
because
know.
a lot of those things now actually work.
It-
Folks, much
Yeah.
closer.
I actually don't know. But it's weird, just, I walk around the corner and there's this entire row of people wearing these garish, sleek looking, but still like big, like white, blinky, light, opaque displays, and they've got like little, like air traffic control batons, and they're playing games and stuff.
It comes back every 27 years.
Maybe it's actually
That's locust, right?
But what I'm wondering is still like, and actually we got a couple partners there, but we're also debuting kind of these like what I call missing link form factors, these wearable things where you slide a phone in and it's side-by-side content, sort of like these do-it-yourself Oculuses, except they won't be bought by Facebook for $2 million, or maybe they will, who knows. But what happens, because I actually went to Stanford BHL recently, and I was doing their virtual phobia training thing when the floor drops out from under you. But I noticed, and not unkindly, they told me it was a beta project, but when I looked down at my feet, where my feet were supposed to be, because I was wearing these ankle sensors, they were just a little bit to the left. So I found myself, like almost falling over a couple times. The woman had to be like, seriously stop and leaning to the left, and then my feet are over here, but I can feel them here, but my eyes are staying over here. What happens when these people try to not play these things on the couch?
They need our floor mats.
They do need the floor mats, actually. Oh, wow, now it all comes together. But seriously, that's a whole other set of technologies, right?
You want
Sensors
really
that-
good tracking.
You have to have it.
And you also want real good sensitivity to what's in the environment.
Yeah.
Because otherwise people will fall over things, and any big company that makes something that causes people to fall over things downstairs, et cetera, gets big lawsuits.
Or, of course, satisfy a
Unless
criminal
you're
desire to kick home. Right.
So that's definitely, people in research do things with room size and larger tracking, but to really do that in an environment which you encourage people to do that, you've got to really know what's in the environment. And the wonderful thing is, there's lots of very bright people doing research on what's called SLAM, simultaneous localization and mapping, being able to figure out through sensors where you are in a strange, unknown environment, and also at the same time do the mapping, do the building up the model of the environment. Especially if it's an environment that doesn't change that much. Like, none of the chairs out there are going to move. These ones on stage will. The stage itself is not going to change. If you start with that model of all the things that won't move a lot, and then just do it, what angle the seats are flipped up, who's on the stage, where the cups are, etc., it becomes a whole lot easier. Still a very hard problem. There's lots of folks working on doing that with wearable sensors and environment-based sensors.
We also need to train our minds to essentially ignore all of the real-world sensory feedback, right? Because that's where the conflict happens.
If the real-world feedback is consistent with the virtual feedback, so if I give you a situation in which there's everything that's here, exactly where it should be, plus there's also a dog, a virtual dog, bouncing around on stage, right? Now, obviously, if the dog runs over my leg and I don't feel anything, then it's cruel and serious.
Well, it's less that. That, I think, is easier for the mind to rectify. I'm not a neurologist or anything. But then, essentially, like, I remember when I first tried the Oculus, I'm in like a battle neck or whatever, and I'm looking around. And then I'm falling from the sky. But my mind knows that my body feels the chair.
Vestibular senses also know that your head is not moving. And so when you are moving a accelerating forward
Yeah,
virtually,
there's no momentum.
and their ear says, I'm not moving.
Yeah.
You know, that's really, really bad.
Well, that's what-
Especially for wide field of view. And
So
yes,
if you-
you have your arms over here, and yet you see the virtual hands moving.
Any other questions here?
Yeah, those are make sure, interesting issues.
Yeah, right up here.
And you had mentioned about,
Yeah, no, because then they can.
and you had mentioned about how the brain has been a constant, but it hasn't changed over time.
I mean, obviously, individual brains can change a lot based on cultural influences, but in evolutionary terms, in natural evolutionary terms, we're starting from the same place that we started from many thousands. Each individual essentially is, that they started from tens of thousands of years ago.
Okay, because I thought it was maybe worth mentioning a little more about how there could be the behavioral differences, again, the individual perception varies, reactions vary, abilities vary, so as far as how people behave in certain situations, it can be fascinating as to, you know, how that plays out, and therefore how augmented reality might moderate those variances in behavior.
Sure, and I think that we can say that of any technology, there are people who are going to be great basketball players, great writers, great musicians, you know, but Mozart isn't going to be able to do what Michael Jordan can do, and vice versa. And so particular technological advances are going to have specific meanings for some people that they're not going to have for others. And my point was that's not something specific to augmented reality, that's something true to all technological advances, but we need to pay attention to it.
There are also differences in training. I mean, you have thousands of years ago and right now in different parts of the world, if you're a little kid, you learn to follow the tracks of an animal, for example. My kids, you know, let them loose in a jungle and they're not going to survive very long. On the other hand, put them in front of an iPhone and their thumbs can do things that some kid who could survive in the jungle would be able to go and do. You know, so clearly as the technology, as the world changes around us, there'll be abilities that kids will have that innately you could argue that they have right now, but they don't exercise, and that people in a very malleable way will use it.
Okay, one more question. We can take one more question for the panel.
Make it a good one.
Somebody must have a burning question that they want to ask.
That's just something we're disagreeing.
Marco.
Cool.
I don't want to end on a negative note, but I mean, we see today the day sounded a little bit like, oh yeah, so we're all aware that holding tablets up in front of objects is not going to work for much longer. We're all kind of waiting for wearables when we really will be able to experience the world in a much more unobtrusive way.